from those chairs. Those who like to dance, or just make romance. Get up and dance. 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 Those who like to fly, those who like to stride, get up on your feet, start dancing in the street. Get up and dance. 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 Get up and dance.
Hey, Roger. Walk over there and get that. Watch this here, watch this. I'm gonna stroll on over there. Hey, baby, you want to dance with me? Yeah, I got my partner over there. We get $50 for you over there.
Get up and dance. 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 Get up and dance.
You got
Get up and dance.
you want to.
Get up and dance. Get up and dance. Get up and dance. No need to despair. We can take you there. Get up there and bustle. Do the Alaska hustle. Get up and dance. Get up and dance. Get up and dance.
You want to.
Get up and dance. Get up and dance. Get up and dance.
Chill factor goes to zero when those winds are start to blow. No, nothing you can wear, girl, helps keep the cold outside. We're too hot, girl, when that breeze just doesn't show. Nothing you can do help keep the chill out. So help me find some shelter from these tackle rims. Help me find some shelter from these tackle rims. Hurricanes are lazy, and northeasters are crazy, yeah. But a taku will teach you you're a fool, and I'm a fool too. North, south, east, west. me find some shelter from this Taku wind. Help me find some shelter from this Taku wind.
Relax. You're quite safe here.
Am I dreaming? No. Where am I? In bed? What am I doing? Talking to myself. Look, I must have a star on my door. Or better still. A door? A door? Oh, swing doors, huh? Okay, doors. Swing. Now I know I'm dreaming. Dreaming. How do I get to sleep? I'll count those bars on the window. 1, 2, 3, sleep. Let me sleep. Poetry. That'll work. Come, sweet slumber, and shroud me in thy purple cloak. Doesn't even rhyme. Is that my tea's made?
Paranoid.
I can't stand tea. Get to sleep.
Trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me.
They say there's gold that can't be found. It's lying there right on the ground. All you gotta do is walk around in Alaska. There's a little gal waiting there. The northern light shine in her hair. I'll have a love and gold to spare in Alaska. Land of the midnight sun. Alaska, we're gonna have some fun when I get there. That wonderland, so I've been told, the highest mountains made of gold. I'm a-heading north to make my roll in Alaska. Like Sophie Smith and Dan McGrew, I'm gonna make my fortune too. Spend it all on a gal that's true in Alaska. Land of the midnight sun. Alaska, we're gonna have some fun when I get there. With a Malibu butt to lead the team, I'm gonna cross that Yukon stream. The love and gold the young man dreams of Alaska. Snowflakes falling down the neck, but I don't care for what the heck. The dog team's mushing on the trek to Alaska. Land of the midnight sun. Alaska, we're gonna have some fun when I get there. With a pick and shovel in my hand, soon I'm gonna make a stand. Love and nuggets hold the man in Alaska. Juneau, Anchorage, Fairbanks, Nome. Soon I'm gonna make my home with a little gal to call my own in Alaska, land of the midnight sun. Alaska, we're gonna have some fun. When I get there, 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 when I get there. Rule number one for a heartache is to need her just a little more each day. Then when you've fallen deep in love with her, the big heartache will soon be on its way. I wonder if there ever was a fool like me who clings to a dream that's been torn apart. I guess that rules were made to be broken, 'cause she broke everyone and my heart. Rule number one for loneliness is to miss her just a little more each day. Soon you'll be right at home with misery. When time goes by, but every memory stays. I wonder if there ever was a fool like me who clings to a dream that's been torn apart. I guess that rules were made to be broken, 'cause she broke everyone and my heart.
Seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
heart. Can't she understand? I don't wanna see her go. I'll be here when she comes home, and I don't wanna be here without you, and I don't wanna be here without you. No, it ain't home. I don't feel the way it should. Don't wanna be here without you. She fly yesterday away 1,000 miles. I drive slowly to my street. My house looks like someplace I don't wanna be. Don't wanna be here without you. 5 days and 100 cigarettes, thinking maybe she won't call. My town looks like someplace I don't wanna be. Don't wanna be here at all. Hey, and I don't wanna be here without you, and I don't wanna be here without you. No, it ain't home. I don't feel the way it should. Don't wanna be here at all. All I do
Litter Free Incorporated would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for their participation in the Spring Cleanup Day last Saturday. Once again, Juneau illustrated its amazing community spirit and accomplished the task of picking up a year's worth of litter. But as everyone knows, litter doesn't stop now, and neither do our cleanup efforts. Nonprofit groups looking for ways to raise funds may earn money from Litter Free for trash pickups throughout the year. For information on how your group can get involved, call Kathleen Gamble at 586-6600.
You could be your car's worst enemy. It's been clinically proven that taking your car to an automatic car wash is better for your auto than hand washing it yourself. Not to mention all the time, energy, and water wasted. So treat your car with the tender, loving care it deserves. Take it to an automatic car wash and get a thorough wash and wax. Save your car and yourself. Brought to you by the Alaska Car Wash Association.
I run a small business. Wilderness Air in Kodiak, Alaska. We provide some of the best salmon fishing in the world.
One of the things that Pete likes about my mailbox, etc., is the fact that we provide copy service, packaging and shipping.
I'm not in the shipping business. I'm in the adventure business.
And it's particularly mailbox services.
John, check my mailbox. Is that prop in yet?
If he's not flying, he's not making money.
I've brought John 60, 65-pound king salmon.
They're more like this.
No, they're this thick.
Depend on mailboxes, etc. It's not what we do, it's how we do it.
That's him, huh? Company stop salesman.
Numero uno. They say he can sell snow in a snowstorm.
Real Mr. Personality.
The guy is a dynamo.
Even the most important dynamic executive can feel downright unimportant.
Miss! Oh, miss!
On a bad flight.
Looks like he's been working non-stop.
Never lets up. That's why he's making the big bucks.
Next trip, try Alaska Airlines. We try to treat everybody like they're somebody.
Who's next?
Production funding for the following program was provided by the First National Bank of Anchorage, serving Alaska since 1922.
The ultimate fantasy for me would be to go back in time. I have no interest in going forward and seeing what the future looks like, but to be able to go back and to actually be in those places and to be part of that for just a day, it's the ultimate fantasy for me. And as close as I can get to it is to paint pictures of them, of these scenes, as I can see through the photographs and from what I've heard from old-timers.
Let me tell you about 4th Avenue. 4th Avenue was this street that was the whole town. And it started out on one side of one street. And it had whatever there was there, the important things. You see, coming in that day, you came by steamboat, and your steamships left Seattle and stopped at all the communities on the way up. They brought in all the freight and all the food and all the mail and all the people, and they were the umbilical cord that kept Alaska alive, that steamship line. When you got to Anchorage, you had visited Juneau, Ketchikan, Petersburg, Wrangell, and many other places, depending on the season. And when you get here, you've seen all that, and here you find Anchorage. It's flat, not hanging on the side of a mountain. It had a straight, wide street. None of the other places had that. No other city in Alaska at that time had been laid out, and I don't think any has been yet since, laid out by the military on a planned basis, like a military program. Rectangular blocks. East and west streets were numbered, and north and south streets were lettered, just like a good old army post. The engineers surveyed the town site to make 50-foot lots, 150 feet long, with an alley. You know, that's a general pattern. There are exceptions, but that was the general layout. Then they designated certain blocks for public use, like one for the city hall, one for schools, one for cemetery, one for whatever. They were reserved, they were set up. And when you say Anchorage is planned, it's the closest that any city ever had of a plan. The federal government sold lots at auction and started the town that way. When I got here, the 4th Avenue was lined both sides with 1- and 2-story buildings, mostly 1-story. Wood frame construction sometimes on nothing but wooden foundations. There's nothing permanent about the place. Nobody had capital. The struggle here was to get into business the best you can with what you've got. Actually, the town started in tents and moved up the hill, up in the bluff, when the engineers laid out the town site. The place developed then, and that took a lot of savings. It took a lot of borrowing and all that. That's the way Anchorage started. Nobody had any money. Nobody was here with any money to speak of. Young bucks, all with a gold background, attracted by the gold stampedes and the dream of finding gold.
Well, they were all looking for jobs, well-paying jobs, and when the gold rushes ran out, and the next big thing was, the next big project was the railroad. So it was like a big semicircle, this migration of young adventurers and people seeking their fortune, going this semicircle around through Dawson City, Fairbanks, Nome I did around, and then down in Anchorage. And many of these early families in Anchorage had done that, had gone that route.
And the ones that provided the steady employment were, in the early days, was the Alaska Railroad. And there was a few of the, I think, Alaska Road Commission and so on. If you worked there, you could get credit anywhere in town, and you could cash a check. And so most of the individuals who were young and getting married and everything seek those kind of jobs so that they would have some kind of security. And other than that, there were construction jobs, there maybe were jobs in the fishing industry that only lasted a few months of the year and hardly provided enough to sustain any family throughout the winter.
There wasn't a whole lot there. There were stores on both sides of the street, but the street was, I would say, 2, maybe 3 blocks long.
There was one day, broad daylight. This had to be in the 20s. I'm sure late 20s probably, where a moose came in from the east end of town and went right down 4th Avenue. And the people in these bars started, word got out there was a moose on this street, and a lot of them carried guns. And they were out there trying to shoot that moose. And my dad says, I wonder if somebody wasn't killed because they were shooting right into each other practically from across the street. And the moose went right out the west end of town, unscathed.
But the people that were here were the pioneer type of people, generally speaking. And they wanted things like where they had been. So they were willing to do the things that were necessary to make the place a better place to live.
They only had one boat a week coming to Alaska, and came from Seattle, and destination Seward, bottom of the railroad. And the train would leave Anchorage with people that were going to take the boat out, and they would go down there and stay overnight in this old hotel in Seward that's still standing there. And then you'd get on the boat the next day, and they'd have all their names in the paper, all those leaving, going down, and have all their names of people coming in, what hotel they were going to stay at and everything. They had a path through the woods from the Anchorage Hotel down through the woods. They called it the Sugar Bowl at that time. But there was a winding trail down through the woods to the railroad station. That's the way people would go down there to meet the train. And the passengers would come up that way, too.
The boat train had come in on Friday, so towards evening,
The locals would go down to the railroad depot and meet the boat train and anyone returning from the States. And then they'd run up the hill to the post office. By that time, the mail was being sorted out, and we sort of lined up against the wall in front of the mailboxes,
waiting for somebody to put the mail into your little box. And they frequently, you know, it was a small population then, frequently they would say, "Oh, Aunt Nellie's going to go and see my mother." You know, everybody kind of knew everybody else's business. Everybody wanted to.
This was a close-knit town. We didn't have an adversary relationship. We were all here together, and we had a friendly feeling toward each other. We worked with each other, and we all wanted to improve the town, make it grow, so we get more amenities. We found every time we get an improvement, some kind, it meant we had better service.
They were eager for anything that was new, and I thought, this is ground level. It's right, I can start right at the bottom and work up.
The north side of 4th Avenue developed in a much better fashion than the south side, and that was, of course, because the sun shone on it. And especially in the winter, people did not like to walk in the shade. They still don't. So if you watch people walking 4th Avenue, the bulk of them will walk on the north side of the street where they're in the sun and the warmth.
You know, Ike Bayless and Z.J. Lusac and Harry Seidenberg and Hewitt's Drugstore. All those stores were along that for 2 blocks. You got mainly 2 blocks of stores. And the town, you know, was divided between east and west, really. The east side was down around C Street, 4th and C, where they had the major bars down there. And in the red light district, that was the so-called bad part of town, or what do you want to call it. And it was a pretty distinct dividing line. The men that wanted to have to drink and raise hell were stayed down the east side, and they lived down there too, and they left the west side alone. There wasn't any bars or saloons on the west side. You could start at D Street all the way west. There wasn't a bar.
The big issue in the city council was where are we going to build the next wooden sidewalk? Because none of the streets were paved, none of them had anything, and they're all in the mud. And so the policy was to build sidewalks, give priority to the projects that would make a network of walkways to get to work. And everybody worked down the railroad yards. So it was all from the residential area into downtown and then Ship Creek. And if you ever want to get a sidewalk built out of line, you had trouble in the city council. Oh, you wait your turn, you get it.
There were a lot of young immigrants from Scandinavia here, and but they had big respect for women. They could go down the East End looking for their husband or something, and go into a bar, and all the cursing and noise would quiet down, and somebody would come forward and say, "Can we help you, ma'am?" I mean, that's the way it was. I saw that happen.
Wasn't the crime here then. No, you could come home at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself if you were a girl, and there was no problem of fear or anything.
And believe me, Anchorage Women's Club deserves a lot of credit for what Anchorage did and accomplished. At that time, the club took responsibility wherever it was needed. A library, to make a library go, to do anything else that really needed done, the Women's Club did. And as is true in smaller towns, outfit like that tends to be much more important than it is later when the library has a library association and And people take responsibility in so many different separate areas and do it and cover it thoroughly. But the Women's Club was the one that was in there along with the Chamber of Commerce, really making Anchorage a city in the beginning. The other thing I like to give some credit to is PTA. And through the years, I think that PTA is a marvelous organization, and under their charter, you can do almost anything that's good for a community, and we did through the years.
You really didn't need a car in Anchorage because everything was so close, and you got Anchorage extended to 9th Avenue. It was an easy walk from 9th to downtown, and so a lot of people didn't have cars for various reasons. Maybe they couldn't afford them, and it was not uncommon for people to walk up to Government Hill on a Saturday night for maybe a sociable card game. And also the Government Hill people to walk over to Anchorage.
And when spring came and the streets were thawing, you couldn't drive a car. You'd go down your hubs in mud and muck, and being nothing but trouble. We had a lot of horses still in use, but we had a lot of trucks showing up and doing the delivering. We had Dirty Face Porter had a contract to plow all the sidewalks with his team of horses with a A-frame plow pulling it around, and he plowed all the sidewalks before work every day. And we didn't try to plow streets. Nobody used their cars in the winter. You walked, and that's the way we lived.
We had a horrible blizzard, the worst I think Anchorage ever had, and it was in March, early March, and went on for 3 days. And it built up snowdrifts. A real strong wind blew roofs off of houses, and snow just deposited real hard drifts as high as 20 feet high. You'd have, right in the middle of the road, right like 4th Avenue. You couldn't go down it because there was just this big, huge snowdrifts. They had horses with sleds out there, but even they couldn't get over those drifts.
So under those circumstances, you would not survive if you got outside of the immediate area. You get too far out, nobody would come to your place of business.
They would try to have a so-called social season. I mean, the different fraternal orders that they had in town. That was a big thing in those days. The Moose, the Elks, the Legion, the Odd Fellows, the Shriners. They all had good attendance and membership. Most of the men in town belonged to almost all of them. And then they would organize dances. And the principal place they held them was at the Elks Hall, and secondary at the Masonic Lodge.
Well, we had the ski jump in the 30s, and it was below the Alaska Native Service Hospital, built on the hill there. And they also had an ice pond down there that we could skate. And we'd have a big bonfire down there at night. It was very, very cold. And there was one street light, I believe, that lit up the area for us. And the skating rink was a busy place. That was at 6th and C Street. And Grover Fireover, he's the one that started the first skating rink for us in Anchorage. And it was quite a gathering place.
Yeah, they had this block that stretched from F Street to G Street on 4th Street, and it was on the north side. And they had 3 federal buildings, small buildings, 3 green federal buildings, and from G Street end was the post office, and then in the middle was the T&T building, they called it, Telegraph and Telephone, which was the connection to the states by wireless, and then the U.S. Marshal's office. And it was surrounded by a lot of ground. It had a lawn out in front and gardening areas along the sides and in the rear. In fact, in the back, they had a half a block of potato fields. And it was a pretty loosely run affair. I mean, these prisoners would go out there and garden in the summertime and raise their own potatoes and strawberries and raspberries. and do odd jobs around the jail there. And, in the wintertime, lots of times my dad gave him enough money to go down to the movie theater. And there was never any if there was a hardened criminal or somebody who committed a real violent crime like a murder, he was pretty well tried and sent on his way outside McNeil Island and Puget Sound, federal penitentiary. But for short-termers, they kept them here. But there were never very many of them.
These prisoners would keep pulling the planks off the floor. They were so rotten they could pull them up and break them out and escape. And they were constantly bringing them back. Well, 1937, we got the federal building built, and that was the first, Uncle Sam's first concrete structure here. The Chamber of Commerce had that on the list of their projects for 20 years, been beating the drums for a federal building.
Well, that's an interesting story how that was built. Jim Farley, who was Postmaster General, was up touring the territory, and the local Chamber of Commerce said they wanted a picture of him.
And I'm driving. I said, would you mind taking a little detour over here? We'd like to have you break ground for a building over here. He said, okay, we can do that.
And they got him in where the federal building is, and handed him a shovel, and they took a picture of him turning the first shovel full of dirt for the new post office building.
Just cooperatives all get up, and he's standing there and he said, Bob, what building are we going to build here? I said, I'll tell it to you, tell you about it later. And he wanted to know more about it. And I filled him full of it on the way to the depot. And then he went back. I don't know what he did, but the federal building was built in the next year or so. Had it underway.
Oh, it was the heart and soul of downtown Anchorage. The two banks and the federal building is what tied things together. And that's where almost all the activity went on.
We didn't have mail delivery then, so you had to go to the post office to get your mail. So that was a daily, once or twice jaunt down to the boxes down there to get your mail. And that's sort of a central meeting place.
It was always kind of manufactured an excuse to go there because I knew I'd find somebody that would be somebody to talk to and visit, and could have a good conversational time.
When the legislature was meeting at times, why people would get on the post office steps and they would campaign for the legislature to pass this item or to pass that item or some other item.
Now, as the town grew, they had to start providing more maintenance for the 4th Avenue, which was a main street. And they gravelled it and improved it, took the mud out and replaced it with gravel, did all that, upgraded it. They used to close it for a week or two every spring to let it thaw, and then scrape it smooth and open it again.
I fondly remember, maybe I shouldn't say fondly, all the potholes that would occur on 4th Avenue. And I recall a few instances too where drivers would see somebody on the sidewalk that they knew and head for a pothole and let them have it.
Then somebody proposed paving it. And then we had health people sounding off about how it would allay the dust, it would improve the food and products and everything you buy in the stores by having cleaner conditions, and that's the truth. It was pretty shabby, all this dust got into everywhere.
Yes, one of my jobs, which is totally environmentally irresponsible now, you would find out, but one of the jobs I had to do at the time was each day I would take the drain oil out from the cars that we'd been working on and throw it in the street in 4th Avenue to keep the dust down.
I think it made quite a difference. We had so much dust before and mud, and of course the sidewalks were paved almost from the start of Anchorage, but to have 4th Avenue paved, and they were paved from C Street to K Street, I believe, and it made quite a difference.
And incidentally, a moose walked across the concrete overnight and put his hoof prints down that end somewhere down there. And we were very proud of those. We wouldn't let them knock them out. They got covered up with asphalt. You can't see them anymore. But
back then, it was, they were still parking on diagonal parking, I believe, as I recall. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And you didn't have any much trouble finding a parking place as you do now, and there were you didn't need meter ferries to go around and plug your meters. There were no meters, and you could park as long as you liked.
The construction boom started really late '39, and then and through the early 40s, because it first started because the military established Ladd Air Force Base as a cold weather testing station. And in order to do that, they had to upgrade the Alaska Railroad. Then came the construction of Fort Richardson, and then things just started to pyramid from then. But once they started to open up the construction on Fort Richardson in the 40s, early 40s, then this town really took off.
Prior to 1940, we were living off each other, you might say, and there was no great volume of business. But with the military, brought the populace in, and mostly single GIs, of course. I don't think there were too many dependents here at the time during the war years. It made a big change, where the local business people, Chamber of Commerce, got interested in developing the town, developing the community, building more additions to buildings, remodeling, and things like that. A lot of that took place during that first 3 years.
As they were putting together some of these big buildings out there, they needed all kinds of things. And when they needed them, they needed 100 of this and 100 of that. And then the National Guard would come down from the villages into Anchorage. I understand that they couldn't get paid until they got on the plane to go home. So I would have to give them credit on everything, and I would pack it all up and ship it out to the native villages. And it's amazing how wonderful those people were, because they would keep ordering all during the year for other things.
here we're this little town. We might be 3,500 by January 1940 when first 4 companies arrived, and they brought in their captains and majors, and we had a colonel in charge. General Buckner soon showed up, and his wife, and we all got acquainted. I was after them all for the news, trying to figure out what does the Army do. Other people trying to sell the Army things and everything. We all got acquainted with them one way or another. They brought their kids and they put them in our schools. I started to get the reports from school teachers about what's happening in the classrooms and how delighted they are to have the Army kids there, because they've been in schools in so many different bases all around the world, and they have enlivened the schoolroom conversations and broadened it, and they're just having a great time. It's good for all the kids. The local boys didn't like it because it's a competition for their girls, but they had to take it, and the place is all spruced up, and they had to learn to compete a bit.
They planned that they would have their utilities in and they would have everything in over a period of time. Men just poured in for the construction money. Families came in, everything came in. So they reached that 30,000 figure in a very short span of time, not in 20 years, in about 3 or 4 years.
We had a volunteer fire department, and whenever the sirens sounded, everybody came out with the radio cradled on their ear to listen to where was it. And eventually KFQD would come on the air and say, well, it's at so-and-so's place. So we'd all go over there and watch the action while the volunteers did their thing with axes and hoses.
It was activity, so people just poured out at night wondering where the fire was, and they'd just trot on down 4th Avenue in their bathrobe.
Fires were big events, and nobody ever missed those.
Yes, it was very scary. December 7th, I remember so well in 1941. It was very cold that day, and they had the sirens going, and we all ran out to 4th Avenue and down to Hill Street, overlooking the inlet. And of course, we saw our planes leaving from Fort Richardson.
And they said our 6 airplanes were headed out toward Coal Bay. 6 airplanes, that was our military.
I remember one day we had 8 air raids, and all of them, none of them were practice alerts or anything of the sort. The Japanese were definitely coming, and we were concerned that there would be parachutes and gliders on the park strip, and there was a patrol on every corner.
And here were all of us jittery guardsmen, not knowing what in the Sam Hill was going on, trying to patrol areas. And it was black, and if there were shadows around, you were a little jittery.
Everybody with a 30-06 and any knowledge of using it was assigned to the various corners of town. And of course, school was let out, and all the kids were told to go home.
And 4th Avenue was completely blacked out. You couldn't see a light, you couldn't see your hand. And that was scary, walking down the street, because you'd never know when you were going to stumble over something.
Had to be completely black. You could get around with flashlights. They would let you have a flashlight to walk down the street, and that's about it, though.
Eventually, I think there was greater terror from the corner patrol with a 30-06 and a little nip or two to keep you warm at each corner than there was from the Japanese, because in the wintertime, in the darkness, there was always, "Who goes there?" And you always answered, "Me, sir, little school child on my way home. I'm not a Japanese. I'm not an infiltrator. It's all right."
And we were called overseas because we were out of the ordinary line of military activity. But oh goodness, there were so many wonderful boys, and there were a lot of boys that didn't come back. And then a USO was built. The USO was really a home for these boys. They lived in one room someplace in town. They didn't have barracks.
Any of the service people couldn't marry, or if they got married, they shipped their wives out. They weren't allowed to have them up here, the families and that.
They were evacuating all the wives because for their security, but basically I think General Buckner had the phone lines checked between Elmendorf and Anchorage to see what was jamming the phone lines, and there were too many wives calling their husbands to go to the commissary and bring home 2 loaves of bread.
Remember, we had a large number of construction people. There was ready money. So we had a heavy concentration of the saloons down around 4th and C and along C Street for a couple of blocks. And along with that came the red light district. And there was a whole string of cribs all the way out from 4th Avenue on C Street out to about 6th. And because we had so many, I mean, there were the single men that were up here. Everybody was after their money.
There were a lot of clubs, and all the clubs had entertainment. They'd have comics, bands. There was a lot of music and comedians. So all the places had entertainment, had live entertainment in those days.
And there were a lot of them that just catered to GIs, and he told me some wonderful stories about the early days where they would have hostesses representing every state. So if you were a lonesome GI from Vermont, you could go in and there would be a hostess from Vermont who would talk Vermont to you and so on.
And then there was entertainment out on the base, of course, during the war. Why, Bob Hope came here, and I don't know how we got it, but civilians got in to see a lot of those shows that they did out there.
No, like I say, I know this town was quite upset when '42, when Bob Hope came to town, and he made the comment that Anchorage at 4th Avenue was the longest bar in the world.
It wasn't true. No. Well, a lot of bars, but it wasn't the longest bar in the world, you know. I mean, there was...
The longest bar in the world. That's, man, we were featured, I remember, on Confidential magazine as City of Sin. Anchorage was a construction town, and payday in Alaska was, payday in Anchorage was just mobs and mobs of GIs and the military police walking up and down 4th Avenue. It was a boom town in many, many ways.
I liked looking in the windows of the pawn shops and seeing all those watches and rings and the things that people would pawn that you just couldn't imagine. You know, if I had nice jewelry like that, I wouldn't be pawning it. But evidently, you know, those people were drinking.
In the 40s, or let's say after 43, you saw very few men on the streets who were not in uniform. And we had a few friends who were conscientious objectors, or some people that were too old or too young, but the young men were predominantly in uniform.
Oh, yeah, lots of soldiers in town, and a great many of them liked Alaska. A lot of them stayed here. They took their discharges here in Anchorage and just stayed in Alaska after they were out.
There were actually 50 airlines then operating out of Anchorage, and they all had the same kind of airplane. It was a surplus DC-3, and they all had the same number in the fleet, 1. And you used to go to one of the bars on 4th Avenue, and you'd write your name down on a list, and they said, "We'll let you know." And at the end of 2 or 3 days, they'd get enough people, 30 or 40 people aboard those DC-3s, and they'd say, "Okay, we're ready to go, Merrill Field at such and such a time," and off you'd go for Annette Island and the 13-hour flight on down to Seattle. So not only was the longest bar in the world, it was probably the longest and the most raucous travel agency in the world, all the way up and down those same bars on 4th Avenue.
Two popular bars that were the South Seas and Lucian Gardens. They were at the opposite ends of town, and they were very, very popular in the evenings. And of course, one of the early bartenders in the South Seas was Wally Hickle, when he first came to town.
Lucian Gardens was a beautiful nightclub. It was downstairs in the Lido building, Lido Cafe building. Of course, people like to dress up in formal wear and go to the Lucian Gardens.
It was one of the few gathering places in town that was big enough to hold a good-sized group. We could hold probably 150 people in it, and it was all in the basement.
And night after night, if the Japanese had just known about it, they could have taken out a good section of our military by one well-placed bomb on the Lucian Gardens. But it was a lot of fun.
And then the South Seas was down at 4th and G. It was also in the basement there. And it had the atmosphere of a South Sea club and palm trees and everything.
But we had, I'd say, 6 or 7 establishments that that employed musicians, and they were supper clubs such as the Starlight Lounge and the Jade Room, and it was sort of it was never really rowdy until the later years on 4th Avenue.
In Seattle, naturally I was asking all kinds of questions, and they said when you get to Anchorage, you're going to find people far better dressed there than any place, most any place. And I found that very true. And they had lovely shops all along 4th Avenue and even on the side streets. Betty Ferris was on a side street, and you could buy the most fashionable outfit that you were looking for.
People up here, first of all, had money, and second, it cost as much freight to send something cheap as it did to send something good. And so the clothing was very nice.
The people that owned the stores were the operators also. They were there, the ones that were selling the clothes and waiting on you. And it was really a very sociable affair going out and buying an outfit. You had a good social time also.
And of course the grand place was the Northern Commercial Company. And that had both a grocery store, and it had clothing, and it had furniture, and they allowed you to charge your groceries for the whole month.
And they delivered.
And delivered.
And you just went in there if you wanted to see the latest of jewelry, the latest of cosmetics, the latest of styles, and you just felt like you're in a really uptown type of a place when you went in there. Made you feel good to go in.
And up the street a ways farther, there'd be another couple of clothing stores, Ike Bayless's, Piggly Wiggly store, Meat Market. The Ship Creek Market was a popular place too, to buy meat. Back in those days, I recall, the grocery store didn't sell meat. It was up to the butcher shops, they called them back in those days. And then there were several restaurants, like I say, the Anchorage Grill, Frisco Cafe and Bar, and Merchants Cafe, Richmond's. And the Union Club was another popular place too. It would have a small restaurant, but in the back would have pool tables, card games, and so on. And just about anything that you needed, it was beyond 4th Avenue.
Up until, say, 1950 and that, my wife and I were running dogs around 4th Avenue and that even way late at night.
We used to drive the dogs up, you know, just as one would drive an automobile on the main streets of town. They didn't plow it that closely.
Another place on 4th Avenue was Kennedy's hardware store on 4th between D and E. Story goes about Kennedy, somebody coming in and saying, wanted to buy an axe, and Kennedy says, okay, we got the axe out, and says it'd be whatever the price was, and the purchaser said, well, I can get it Sears for half that. And Kennedy said, oh, I'll meet Sears' price. And so he got the package and he wrapped it all up, and he says, that'll be the Sears price plus $1 handling and shipping charge. And the fellow says fine and paid him. And then Kennedy threw the axe back on the back shelf and says, come back in 3 weeks and you can get it.
Yeah, Hughes was a combination. There was a soda fountain, restaurant, drugstore, magazine rack place. But everybody seemed to gather in those sort of places back in those days. And you walk by and look in the window, and if you saw Dr. Hines in there or somebody you knew, well, you went down and sat down and talked with them and had a cup of coffee. And as I recall, they had young girls and their high school girls usually working as soda jerks. And so the teenage boys hung out there quite a bit too.
We had no sign ordinance, so anybody used their own imagination how to put up a sign. When you got a street full of 1- and 2-story buildings, and you put a sign out in front, and each one wants it seen the farthest, it has to get bigger and bigger and stick out farther and higher. And 4th Avenue was quite a blaze. At night it was interesting to stand there with your camera on a tripod and take night shots of all the neons. It looked something like Las Vegas, but it wasn't backed up by much except these little joints.
If you wanted to meet any of your good friends, you usually went to Club 25. That was the name of it. And she had a drink that was called the Comet. She never would let you know what was in it. Myrtle Stolniker was her name. Boy, she made an awful lot of comets. And I'm sure she made a lot of money off of her comets. Her comets really flew high.
Cap Lathrop went first class, whatever he did. The theaters that he built were way beyond what you'd expect to find in Alaska or many other places.
In the early 40s, we had just the Empress Theater here, and people would be lined up to get into the theater. The first usherettes in Anchorage worked for at the showing of Gone with the Wind, and they sent up uniforms for them, and I was one of the first usherettes. And they would be lined up for almost a block to get in because the Army was moving in about that time, and there was no real recreation here except going to the movies.
4th Avenue Theater was a real interesting building. It was built, of course, as you know, by Captain Austin E. Lathrop. And Cap Lathrop was a very interesting person. He was an entrepreneur. He started out in shipping out of Seattle and then moved to Cordova when Cordova was booming with the railroad, and then moved on up to Fairbanks and Anchorage. And what he wanted to do was build a theater that'd be a tribute to him. And they had the old Empress Theater, but the 4th Avenue Theater was to be his crowning glory.
I had never seen anything as grand as that in my life. You looked up and saw those stars twinkling in the ceiling and the murals on the walls. I was really impressed.
Oh, they were astounded at its opulence. You know, all the woodwork in it is walnut, and the on each side of the proscenium arch is done in gold leaf and silver leaf. And going upstairs to the mezzanine, all the animals, the flora and fauna was in silver leaf. And the carpet was very luxurious. It's just beautiful.
He just wanted to showplace the Italian marble on the outside. That was all Cap's idea.
An 1,100-seat theater on 4th Avenue in a population at that time, well, when he started, his population about 4,000. By the time it was finished, the population was up to around 8,000. That takes a lot of foresight, especially when you consider the money it cost to build it that way.
Many wonderful memories of standing out in the cold, cold weather, zigzag lines, waiting so we could get into the movie. We all dressed for it and had a great social time because you knew everybody standing in line.
And Cap would never allow any popcorn or any food in his places. But he couldn't keep kids from their little jackknives carving up the upholstery and the seats and stuff in the dark. And here he opens up this beautiful new theater, and I asked Sid Rayner, after he'd been running for a month or so, what's the reaction of people? How do they treat your new theater? Are you getting as much vandalism as you did in the other one? He said, no. He said he notices the same people who came there in their old work clothes and look pretty shabby are getting all dressed up and coming down here to go to the movies. And the kids are behaving better and they're not carving it up. And it's just raised everybody's standards.
The Oyster Loaf Bar was a meeting place for, well, I particularly remember as after hours, after the city council meetings. You'd find the assembly members cussing and discussing the meeting, and the council members, they settled many things not in official action, but in unofficial agreement that that's the way they wanted to go. And then when it came up to a meeting, there was not as much discussion. I don't know whether it's good or bad to have changed that. I think it worked very satisfactorily for Anchorage in those years.
It seemed like in Alaska, you would be wearing hoods, not hats. Well, that's all you could find. So I decided, well, I would make some hats because I learned how to make hats. I made 40 hats, and I thought, well, this is the time to start a store. So I called it the Hat Box because the little place that I bought was just about the size of an elongated hat box. And I'm telling you, I opened the store at 11 o'clock on August 17th, 1948. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't have a hat left. Honestly, I mean, I was so shocked I couldn't believe it.
So you saw, you know, attempts at a community, attempts by a community to be a community like all the communities they had left behind, wherever it is everyone had come from, and they'd all come from all over the place. So in that sense, it looked like an all-American city. I mean, I've always thought it was no small irony that in, what was it, in the, was it 56? In the mid-50s at some point, Anchorage was voted an all-American city, and they strung that banner across 4th Avenue. And I think it's ironic and it's charming because the Anchorage is so proud. It seemed to be bursting at the seams with this pride of being just like everywhere else. Yet, at the same time, there's this idea that they wanted to be different than everywhere else.
Congress voted to enact the statehood bill in 1958 in June. We didn't become a state until January 3rd of 1959. That's a roughly, call it 6 months. And in that 6 months, our economy became dynamic. Things changed. Attitudes of people changed. Their expectations changed. This seemed to be raise the ceiling of their anticipations or their plans, their aspirations. They figured we're going to be a state. We're going to do things. And they're all ready to do it. And we had it happening before statehood. It's amazing how just that prospect did it.
Personally, I think statehood brought more sophistication. It brought people in that were concerned about saving for some type of a future. In those days, the old days, money was no object. Nobody owned a home. Very few people. They had no. They didn't want to plan for the future, retirement. All of these guys were single. And when statehood came in, they kind of settled down.
I would imagine there are old timers. I'd be interested to hear what they have to say. Who might speak a little regrettably about it, because it did change, perhaps, or was bound to change the things that made the place unique, or made us that created that sense of separateness that seemed to be important.
Wiggles performed a lot of the downtown places down there, a place called the Alaskan Lounge, which later on, after the earthquake, it converted to the Forum Club, which relocated on Spenard Road. And downtown on 4th Avenue, this fellow Don Chin, who owned the Green Apple, he opened up a nightclub there called the China Doll. And Wiggles performed there on 4th Avenue. There was another place way back here before the quake called the Back Street. And they had entertainment in there. Wiggles performed there. I don't know, it was kind of an exciting time. Of course, drinks were not expensive. There wasn't the drug problem there is now, and people kind of respected each other.
The part I liked about it, they used to come in and he'd timber the house. I'd never heard of that before. Timber the house. That means everybody in there get a drink on them. Everybody in there get a drink. Whatever the drink is, okay, how much it costs. You double them up, it's okay. And that means at every bar. You could go in, that I ever worked in, 3 or 4 times a week, somebody come in and timber the house.
Real simply, South Central Alaska was hit by the largest earthquake in North American history that's ever been recorded and studied. The ground simply broke away out in Prince William Sound, and the shock waves emanated out from that, moving at tremendous speed, and we were hit hard here.
It was almost a ghostly type of feeling to me, because there were no lights, and at the time of the earthquake, there was quite a bit of fog in the Anchorage area, and it sort of lit a ghostly atmosphere to the whole thing, just unreal, hard to believe.
One outfit, the urban renewal people, decided they're going to have to urban renewal the whole town site. So what does that mean? I want to know right away. What does that mean? Well, you have to get out of the way. Everybody has to move off, and we will do our thing, and then there'll be arrangements for, if you want to, you can come back and buy your property back again after we've improved it and made it safe.
Well, we always knew, we've always had confidence in Anchorage and in Alaska. We immediately announced the building of an office building to help the people who were feeling that maybe that was the end of the road. We announced we were going to build the first modern office building for rent, which we did. And I think that helped the people and gave them some confidence that if the banker was interested in building a new building, certainly it wasn't all gone.
And the earthquake came in, as you know, March 1964, and I literally announced I was going to build a hotel right after that. And I guess there were some benefits. The earthquake was a tragedy, but then everyone wanted to help. The people outside and the suppliers and the banks and everyone. But more than that, everyone was so busy, no one was trying to stop me. That's important.
I think that had a great deal to do with the resurgence of the business confidence in downtown Anchorage, because they built in a place that a lot of people were leaving, saying it's too dangerous to be here. They showed faith in the fact that the town would recover, and that they were willing to put their money into buildings in just an area that was pretty high risk.
The city had to negotiate with these urban renewal guys. They wouldn't give up. But we got them negotiated down to that buttress area. You know the buttress area? That's what they finally got to urban renewal. And they spent 2 or 3 years working on that. They spent $20-something million on it. And after they threw, they won't let a building more than 2 stories high sit on it, and all that stuff. And while they did that, we rebuilt the whole town and had it all going strong. Well, they're still working on theirs.
It changed the town, you might say, from a frontier type of stores to more modern structures that they have now. But here again, that I don't know, the old friendly atmosphere of the town changed at the same time when it was rebuilt.
I think that the earthquake had a lot to do with the elimination of the nightclubs and the downtown bars and the way people were acting as far as going out partying around in those days. Because when that street went down, it made people do a lot of soul searching.
Oh, the earthquake made some changes for the better. What was rebuilt, redone, restored was so much better than it had been before. It's an awful thing to say, but that side, north side of 4th Avenue, was not the most desirable. Some of the other side of 4th Avenue wasn't either, but when it was gone, what was put in its place was infinitely better.
When I'm working and painting a picture of early Anchorage, I'm there. And I think about what it would be like to be there and to go into the shops. And there are a lot of stories that come out of the oyster loaf. But I would love to just spend an evening and eavesdrop in that restaurant.
Whatever we needed to get, we went down 4th Avenue and got it. And if ever we were lonely, we went down 4th Avenue and saw somebody that we could stop and visit with them, and knew most everybody we met.
Well, what I remember is it used to be very easy to run and park your car in front of the post office, run in and get your mail.
Miss most of all knowing everybody that I would meet.
The relationships that we had with each other, it was all very close, and we were dependent upon each other for so much.
I remember as a little kid running down 4th Avenue, coming from a Douglas Fairbanks movie.
And then came the time when you had to park on the side street and run in and get your mail.
The first movie I ever saw was at the 4th Avenue Theater.
And in the most boring movie, you could lean your head back and look up and watch the Big Dipper.
I remember the first time I was outside of Alaska as a child, and obviously my understanding of constellations was fairly limited because I was surprised to learn that they too could see the Big Dipper. I thought it was our stars.
I can never look at the post office steps without thinking how much fun it was standing out there in the sun talking to old friends.
Then there came a time when you had to circle the block once, hoping someone would have driven out and you could park.
Well, I miss what it was. I don't like to drive down 4th Avenue now and get caught in traffic or try and park there.
I miss the excitement of going out there. There's always somebody you know.
Ship Creek Market. There's an old-fashioned butcher shop where you go in and order your meat, and he'd cut it off of the carcass and cut it, fix it in any fashion you wanted.
And then, and then it got worse and worse.
I don't think there was a day that went by that I didn't go down to 4th Avenue, because that's where I met people that I knew, and could talk to them, and maybe sit down and have a cup of coffee with them.
I don't see on 4th Avenue anymore all of my friends. I don't see that meeting place that we used to have.
It was Main Street, USA.
Production funding for the preceding program was provided by the First National Bank of Anchorage, serving Alaska since 1922.
One time I had a Chevrolet car. It wouldn't go fast and it couldn't go far, and it belched out a cloud of smoke that could hide the mill. Things got worse as time came to pass. I'd fill up the oil and just check the gas, and the damn thing would shake and shimmy just standing still. I went out to start it one rainy morn. The only things working was the lights and the horn, and I got so damn mad I kicked a tire and I scuffed up my shoe. Porky Bakar, he come on the scene and he stared at me and my machine and said, "Boy, you use my truck. Her name is Blue." Well, things went fine for quite a spell. Me and old Blue just drove like hell until one day her shift stick had started acting queer. I mean, Blue drove fine, but the shift was loose, like pulling on the beak of a long-necked goose. It was all limp and floppy, like a pretzel soaked up in beer. So I got on the telephone and I called up Porky. He'd been doing some welding on his backhoe, ran out of acetylene. Never thought he'd run out of acetylene. But I said, "Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you, 'cause I think that I just heard old Blue. I'm hoping and praying that it ain't too bad, but I don't know what to do. So Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you." And old Porky, he just said, "Oh, well, I know her shifter's loose a bit, but she just likes you to play with it. It gets her all hot and bothered and makes her squeal." So I played with her shifter like I was told, until one night I tried it when my hand was cold, and she shivered and she quivered and she threw off her left front wheel. So I got back on the telephone again and I called up Porky. He just sat down to a nice supper Patty fixed up for him. Little lobster, little crab, some black cod. "Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you, 'cause I think that I crippled up old Blue. I'm hoping and I'm praying that it ain't too bad, but I don't know what to do. So Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you." And Porky, he leaned back and he just said, "Oh, well, now Blue's kind of lazy and it's a shame, but then she just starts acting lame. We'll put the wheel back on and let it mend." So he did, and Blue was acting fine until I felt it clunking her to hell of a whine and found her drive shaft hanging back from her rear end. So I got back on the telephone one more time and I called up Porky, who was set to try out a new waterbed he got for Christmas. Patty said that the tide was just about right. And I said, "Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you, 'cause I think that I just killed old Blue. I'm hoping and I'm praying that it ain't too bad, but I don't know what to do. So Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you. And Porky, he just said, oh, hell. Now don't go fussing and feeling bad. Blue's worked all her life and her joints are bad, and sometimes they act a little bit like my own. It's a universal problem. But since you've been driving my pickup truck, boy, you've had an awful run of luck. So I think I'm gonna disconnect my phone. And he left me with a Dixie cup and a thread. He told me to go set crab pots in Swan Lake. And then I saw him ride off in a helicopter. Said he was gonna start up some volcano. I was feeling real bad. But I said, Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you. 'Cause I think that I just killed old Blue. I'm hoping and I'm praying it ain't too bad, but I don't know what to do. So Porky Oliver Bakar, I'm calling you.